As you know, the Family First have a conference on in Auckland, the Family Forum, I think it's called, and they've got some really interesting speakers here. Speakers who represent points of view we do not often hear in New Zealand. And you will be aware that there are amendments to our end-of-life choice legislation going through Parliament at the moment that actually, I think, increase some safeguards and give people more options to opt out of. And I will express my personal view here, what I've always considered kind of legalised suicide. So I am not in my heart an advocate of euthanasia, but I know many people are, and we've been through a democratic process to get it. One of the speakers at this conference is Amanda Achtman. I hope I've got that right. And she is, I was going to call her an anti-euthanasia advocate, but I think that's a negative way to explain what she does. I think she is someone who critiques and looks at other options than euthanasia, would be the way I'd put it. She joins us by video link now. Amanda, welcome to the platform. Did I get your last name correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Amanda, how would you describe yourself?
My mission is preventing euthanasia and encouraging hope, first and foremost, across my home country of Canada, but increasingly around the world, because Canada really stands as a cautionary tale about where the expansionist euthanasia policies are going.
Okay, what is the deal in Canada? When did you introduce euthanasia, and at what level does it operate now?
Canada legalized euthanasia nationwide in 2016. It was not by a referendum, but rather by the Supreme Court deciding, due to various cases, that there could not be a criminal prohibition on assisted suicide, and then making an exemption to the criminal code of criminal code offense of homicide was what the Parliament did in order to react to that Supreme Court ruling. So Parliament created a special exemption to the criminal code offense of homicide for doctors and nurses that abide by the criteria that has been set out for, as we call it, medical assistance in dying, which encompasses both euthanasia, where the doctor or nurse directly administers the lethal injection to the patient, as well as assisted suicide, where the patient would take it him or herself. However, the vast majority, something like 99% of cases, are that direct euthanasia, because by and large, people prefer to have a doctor or nurse end their life rather than doing it themselves. And so Canada legalized euthanasia with these parameters. Initially, that death had to be reasonably foreseeable, a person having a grievous and irremediable condition, these kind of criteria that we hear across jurisdictions. And then in 2021, the government expanded euthanasia on the basis of disability and mental illness. Now, the mental illness alone has not taken effect. It's been bumped year after year to 2027. But as of 2021, we created a track called Track 2 for the non-terminally ill. That means people with disabilities and chronic conditions are now given suicide assistance rather than suicide prevention.
Yeah, I must say, though, and I need to declare a personal interest here. My brother, my half-brother died of suicide 3 years ago, and the coroner's report suggested that Kenneth Law, are you aware of Kenneth Law? Okay, Kenneth Law's a guy who was selling suicide packs out of Canada. I think he's facing multiple charges of murder, and I am not. My understanding is he may use Canada's euthanasia regime as part of his attempted defence if he defends these charges. So how many people a year are euthanizing themselves or being euthanized in Canada? We got a figure?
Yeah, so first of all, I'll say suicide is always a tragedy, and I'm sure many other listeners of yours have also been personally touched by suicide. Now, this trauma and this sorrow is touching hundreds of thousands of Canadians, because since legalization in 2016, more than 70,000 Canadians have had their lives prematurely ended by a doctor or nurse in a hospital, a home, or even in national parks, which the government advertises is something that you can do. And so we are now up to the point where 1 in 20 deaths in Canada is medically assisted, meaning a doctor or nurse killing his or her
1 in
patient.
20 deaths in Canada, euthanasia.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Are you world leading in this?
Canada has become known as the euthanasia capital of the world, and the uptake has been remarkable. What I want to convey is that once euthanasia becomes normalized, once it goes from being exceptional to becoming routine, what actually happens is it transforms the entire society into considering that maybe this is not even an exception, but maybe this is actually the ideal form of dying. The proponents of euthanasia in Canada don't speak very much even anymore about pain and suffering, but rather about the proposal that you could simply control the timing of your death, gather everyone around, schedule it at a time that's mutually convenient. And so this is really about a much wider and sweeping cultural shift than it is about the medical context or even the usual topics that had formerly been the grounds for legalizing euthanasia in the first place.
It's like Logan's Run, that movie Logan's Run. That's where you kind of end up. And of course, this is exactly what advocates said wouldn't happen.
The challenge is once euthanasia is presented as reasonable or compassionate, why wouldn't it be expanded?
Wouldn't you agree, though, that people who are terminal and are suffering should have a way to alleviate that suffering?
Absolutely. I'm not a masochist. I don't think that people should be tormented in their suffering or need to suffer more than necessary. But this is why I'm such an advocate, as you said at the beginning, of other options. So often euthanasia represents a declaration of defeat and despair. It's a cry for help, not a cry to have life ended. When someone is suffering to the extent of almost begging for death, that person is saying, really, I cannot live this way. Help me to live a different way, rather than saying, kill me now.
Yeah, and
so
palliative care palliative care and understanding the process of dying for the person dying and the family seems to me to be the way to go. What is the global trend in terms of euthanasia? Has anyone turned back the tide on it or not?
It has largely been expanded wherever it has been brought in. More and more countries are considering it. The UK is in the midst of a rigorous kind of public debate, and it's passing through the stages of the parliamentary process there. Many other countries in Europe are considering it. Even in parts of the world that it would be less expected, there are cases of people traveling to end their lives privately at the clinics in Switzerland and things like this. And so euthanasia, I think, represents one of the rising issues of the 21st century. Aging populations, challenging issues around the economy. This is going to become an increasing temptation. And I, as a young person, am looking out and thinking, well, what is on offer? I really insist that it has to be something better than death. We cannot concede and capitulate to what is a form of suicidal ideation. And one more point on this I'll make is that when someone is suffering a terminal illness or a chronic condition or is living with a disability, I think worse than any of those things is the suggestion that you would be better off dead. People can abide their illnesses and disabilities differently if the society gives support and affirmation of the goodness of their existence. What people cannot abide is being rejected, discarded, and discounted in their condition.
Okay. Look, I want to go back to that figure you quoted, 1 in 20 deaths in Canada each year. Well, are they euthanasia or are they medically assisted? Because some people have taken issue with that on our text.
In Canada, medical assistance in dying encompasses both direct euthanasia, which is 99% of cases, as well as assisted suicide, which is where it's self-administered. And so about the last year for which we have data was 2023, and in that year there were 15,000 people who had a doctor or nurse directly and intentionally end their life with a lethal injection.
Okay, thank you for absolutely clarifying that issue. What response do you have to your stance? What are the most powerful arguments against the position you take?